Welcome back, guys and girls, to my top 10 of 2012 countdown. Game of the year is in sight. We are here now with number 3, ready to kick off the gold, silver, and bronze winners. 7 games have been revealed, 3 awaiting their calling card. Now, an interesting note is that these top 3, none of them would I have guessed would make my top 3 when the year started. And on one hand, that's a really cool fact because there were definitely some surprising games this year, and on the other hand, some of the bigger ones were big letdowns, so it kind of balances out. But without further ado, number 3 for my game of the year 2012 is The Walking Dead. Ghost, how could you put the game so low on your list? Guys and girls, let me get that disclaimer out of the way right away. What did I not like? Why is Walking Dead 3 and not 1? Well, first of all, it doesn't have a whole lot of gameplay in it, and that for me is the biggest knock I can put against The Walking Dead. The story is fantastic, favorite story of the year. The characters are fantastic, favorite characters of the year. But that doesn't necessarily make for the best game, and Game of the Year specifically states that it should be my favorite game of the year. And while Walking Dead had the most eloquent plot and the most fun decisions and choices, I didn't feel like the gameplay was really much to say anything about. It's a couple button presses, walking around with a sloppy point and click, and yeah, that's the extent of it. Now, that doesn't take anything away from Walking Dead, and I now will gush about how I think this game is so watershed and landmark and fantabulous in every way. The 5 episodes were all individually great on their own accord, and they were great as a unit, and I think that's something that deserves a high spot already. Telltale was really the first company that made me interested in a downloadable episodic series, and this being the first one. They've tried it before with Sam and Max, they've tried it before with Back to the Future, with Jurassic Park, and none of those grabbed my interest, and it's not necessarily because of the IP. Walking Dead is an interesting series, but I think it's the way in which they handled it, the level of the amount of cliffhangers that they had, the way that they sort of really drew you into the characters, the writing was top-notch, and those choices, man, they really impacted things. And now, it was a little disappointing to see at the very end of the game that there weren't too many variations that you could achieve, but during the journey, man, it felt good to pick who would stay, who would go, who you should feed, who you shouldn't feed, what you should do with this zombie or that zombie or this situation. It really felt fully immersive, like I was part of this zombie apocalypse, and it allowed me more than ever before to place my own judgment, my own thoughts and opinions and values upon a character and say, what choices should I make given the situation? And a lot of people will say that Lee is probably their favorite character of the year, and while I really do like Lee, I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was more than most characters you find in video games, someone that you could easily place yourself on. He was a very soft-spoken, and he took control when he needed to, but for the most part, you could basically put any personality that you may have upon him and carry out the actions in that way. And I think they did a really great job of finding a nice balance of Lee, making him a strong character and also making him one that would be receptive of your own opinions, your own values, and so you could sort of use him as a mirror for what you would do in a zombie apocalypse. My favorite episode, My favorite episode is probably episode 4. I thought that one was just excellent. It drew me in the most. I was a little disappointed in the ending, although I felt it very poignant, very emotional. By far the most emotional game of the year, and I'm sure many of you who've played can attest to the fact that this one was both a tearjerker and a tension craze fest. So many times that countdown timer, which I think is a brilliant inclusion to choice-based narratives, that timer that forces you to decide, are you going to save Doug or Carly, are you going to save Duck, or are you going to save whatever you're going to do is on a leash, and I like that. If you're trying to save the galaxy in Mass Effect, you can sit there for 500 years until you decide what the best choice is, but Walking Dead says, hey, make this decision fast, and while some will argue that is unrealistic, I feel it's very realistic. When you're in life, you don't sit there and say, hold on, let me go see who we're going to save for 5 hours, hold on, let's talk about this for the next 6 days. You got to make the decisions in the moment, and I think that that's something that Walking Dead, while some people will knock it for, I think it's one of its greatest strengths, is that timer that makes your choices very set in stone. It makes them very cut and dry, and boom, 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 your decisions are there and they're done. And I never found myself wanting to restart because I was so invested in the character, so invested in the world. I was ready for any outcome to my decisions, whether they be good, bad, whether I regretted them or not. And I definitely did regret some. I played Heavy Rain a couple years back, and that is a game that I restarted once or twice, and I regret restarting it once or twice, but in the moment, I didn't feel as attached. I felt like it was much more of a gamey decision, so I wanted to see what the other outcomes were. In Walking Dead, I was committed to my world, and by making me feel so attached to the characters and to the storyline. Telltale really allowed me to live out my version of The Walking Dead, and different people had different choices, and like I mentioned, it was kind of unfortunate that they didn't pan out in 6 different endings. I'd like to see one where this guy went with this guy and this person. I'm not going to spoil the ending in case you haven't played, but it ended in a good enough way that sort of is washed over. The fact that they didn't have a variable ending, which would be almost impossible to do anyways. It leaves me very excited for Season 2 of Walking Dead and where it carries forward. My concern is that they will just ride high on their story, and it will become more and more apparent as it's the second time around, the third time around, that this is interactive fiction and not do much with the game. Granted, everyone is saying this is one of the best games of the year. It is potentially the game of the year. It is such a great game. But when it boils down, what more is it than, those old games like Freddy Fish or Putt Putt or Pajama Sam? It's a basic point and click with a storyline that is top-notch. And that doesn't take anything away from the game. I still level it at number 3 on my Game of the Year list. Out of all the games that came out, it still comes in at one of the top spots. But as a game, I cannot rate it as highly, because when I think back to my experience playing, I enjoyed playing the game, quote-unquote, but really I enjoyed listening and watching more than I did actually playing. And that's not to say that every game has to have the best mechanics to be the best game, but I like a little bit more from my games. You'll find with my top 2 choices, I really, really dug the mechanics. I really liked what I was doing moment to moment. I really got enveloped in how I was interacting with the game, as opposed to just being passive in a physical sense. Mentally I was fully there. Mentally I was fully invested, but physically and my interaction with the controller, with the title, I did not have as much of a connection. There were a couple story beats I thought were a little bit strange. Some plot points were stronger than others, some were weaker than others. I never understood why they didn't really pursue any sort of romantic twist with Lee. I would have liked to see at least one option that led that direction. Maybe it's because he just didn't find any of the ladies of Walking Dead pretty enough, but hey, they're going to have some slip-ups for each person, and overall I thought they told a story that really just captivated the entire gaming industry, and that's something that is quite remarkable, especially when we still get bogged down by that stupid argument of our games it's a good story for a game, it's, all that nonsense. This sort of shoved that aside, and for that alone, this is a very watershed game. I just would like to see them expand upon the gameplay side of it and deliver something that's a little bit more fully featured next time around. Season 2, my ideal Season 2 of Walking Dead, features a fantastic story, features great characters. Definitely, I'd like to see a new lead character for you to play as, and it would include... I don't know. I don't know if I wanted to go more action or more point-and-click, but I would like to see at least more puzzles, at least more of an involvement from me, the player. The risk you run is bogging down in puzzles, bogging down in action, and losing the narrative linearity that Full Control provides you. And that's probably why this game was so successful. There really wasn't many rough edges. It was very streamlined in terms of story. They got to pick and choose and pull and prod exactly where you went. There was never too long of a down moment. A simple puzzle here or there broke up the monologues and broke up the story and broke up the dialogue bits, but it did not interfere with your enjoyment and the overall flow of the overall story, and in that sense they were successful in what they did. It just was not necessarily my 100% favorite. Nonetheless, Walking Dead is a fantastic game, and at its price point, I can 100% wholeheartedly recommend it to any fan of gaming, any fan of storytelling, any fan of movies, really. I think it fares better for me than the TV show. I even enjoyed this story with Lee more than I enjoyed the Walking Dead comic story, which I have read, and Clementine is one of the most emotionally connected kids, I think, that they've ever created in a video game. Usually, games you think of like Fallout, Oblivion, all these titles, they stay very far away from children. They don't want you to kill them, they don't want you to hurt them, and they're not featured very often. I thought that Clementine was the first experience, like, I really care about this kid. I really can sense that they have all of the qualities of a kid, and that their heart and their mind are in a very kid space, and therefore they require to be treated as such. And that was an interesting experience to sort of have Lee develop as this parent character. And there was, of course, many other interesting developments with Kenny and friendships and things that I thought panned out really well, and allowing them to sort of settle and simmer in between episodes, while was exciting because you wanted to see the next part. I did feel like at points it would have been better if you played them all 5 in a row. I wonder how it would have been if I played all 5 episodes in a row, to see full remembrance of every dialogue. They did do the last time on Walking Dead, next time, which of course is a great feature to have in any story-driven game. But it would be interesting to go back and play the 5 all in a row, one after the other, sequentially, and see how that compares to this sort of spread out episodic format. And I know that episodic is something that Telltale's always wanted to do, and this is really their first shining star hurrah moment, so I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Just something to point out. But Walking Dead is amazing. I love the game a lot. That is my number 3, The Walking Dead. Alright, guys and girls, we only have 2 left. Can any of you guess what they are? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on The Walking Dead and how it affected you, positive, negative, what you thought of the game, if it was your favorite, not your favorite, you played it, you didn't play it, why you did, why you didn't. I think it's a great game. I really had a lot of fun with it, but for me, when I look back at the year, I had a really hard time justifying putting it at number 1, and therefore it did not earn the number 1 spot. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to because I know that a lot of you guys wanted me to, and I knew that it was my favorite story, and story is a really big part for me. It's a real nail in the coffin for me in games. The story's great. I love it. The story's terrible. It really sours me on the experience, but I just found myself questioning that over and over, and so that is why I had to put The Walking Dead at number 3, because while I feel like the story experience was phenomenal, there were 2 better game experiences for me in 2012, and we will find those out soon. Hit that like button, add your favorites if you're enjoying the countdown. I will see you all very soon. Drink some matcha. Have a fantastic day, guys and girls. Number 2 is coming up next. Until that time, we will see you all later. Halo 4, thank you. Oh my... Pushy eggs. Let's go. Oh God, here we go. In the jungle.